You think you made a decision today. You chose what to eat, what to wear, whether to respond to that message or leave it on read. You felt the moment of choosing. You felt like you were in control. You weren't. Not entirely. Not in the way you think. Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet ran an experiment in the 1980s that nobody in science has been able to fully explain since. He asked people to move their wrist whenever they felt like it, completely freely, no timing, no pressure. While they did, he monitored their brain activity and recorded the exact moment each person felt the conscious intention to move. What he found shook the foundation of everything we assume about free will. Your brain decided to move before you were conscious of deciding, not milliseconds before. Up to 10 full seconds before you felt the intention to act, your brain had already begun preparing the movement. The decision happened without you. And then, a moment later, your conscious mind received the signal and felt like it had just made the choice. You didn't choose. You were informed. This is what psychologists call the unconscious driver, the part of your mind that processes 11 million bits of information per second while your conscious awareness handles roughly 50. The gap between those two numbers is where your real decisions are made. You never had access to that room. You only ever see the output. And the output is shaped by things you never agreed to. Robert Cialdini spent decades studying the invisible architecture of human influence. What he found was that humans don't decide based on logic. They decide based on patterns, mental shortcuts the brain developed over hundreds of thousands of years to avoid burning too much energy on thinking. These shortcuts have names: scarcity, authority, social proof, reciprocity, commitment, liking. And they work not because you are weak. They work because your brain is efficient. It learned long ago that if everyone around you is doing something, it's probably safe. If someone in a position of authority says something, it's probably true. If something is rare, it's probably valuable. These weren't tricks invented by marketers. They were survival rules written into your nervous system long before language existed. They kept your ancestors alive on the savannah. They also keep you buying things you don't need, agreeing with people you shouldn't trust, and avoiding risks that might have changed everything. Antonio Damasio discovered something else entirely. He studied patients with damage to the emotional centers of the brain, people who could think perfectly clearly and reason logically. By every measure, their intelligence was intact, but they couldn't decide anything. Not what to eat for lunch, not which appointment to schedule first. Every small decision became an infinite loop with no conclusion. What Damasio realized was devastating to the idea of pure rational thinking. Emotion isn't the enemy of good decisions. Emotion is what makes decisions possible at all. You don't choose with your logic, you choose with your feelings, and then your logic builds the justification afterward. The rational explanation you give for your choices, the one that sounds so considered, so reasonable, is almost always constructed after the fact. A story your conscious mind tells itself to explain what already happened somewhere below the surface. You are not the author of your decisions. You are the narrator. So go back to today. That choice you made this morning, the one that felt deliberate, entirely yours. It was shaped by what you saw last night, by a conversation 3 weeks ago you barely remember, by a pattern your brain locked in before you were 7, by whether you were hungry, by whether the room was warm. None of that felt like influence. It never does. The invisible force doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It was already finished working long before you opened your eyes and thought, "Today, I'll think for myself." The only question worth asking is not whether you can escape it. You can't. The question is whether you can learn to see it. Because the moment you notice the pattern, the scarcity that makes you rush, the authority that makes you comply, the emotion that makes you certain, you get something rare. A half-second pause between the force and the decision. That pause is the closest thing to free will that actually exists. And it starts right now.